Boy, oh boy, I'm kind of looking at this pile of precious metals, and even though these have been part of my stack, many of these going back probably decades or maybe even a little bit longer, it still gets my blood pumping, gets my heart thumping, and I love to see this kind of thing. I have always been fascinated with precious metals and rare coins and bullion. So if you too are a stacker of these things, or if you want to be a stacker of these things, I've got something kind of interesting to share with you that unless you were really carefully considering these items, you might not ever have really thought about, and that there is a thread that connects some of these pieces that you might not expect. I like to call that thread non-face legal tender, NFLT. And that's what this video is going to be about. If you're new to the channel, my name is Dub C. I want to thank you for being with me here. Hopefully you will click on the subscription button, hit the notification button, and hopefully you will like this video, so click on the like button also. Love to have you be part of this community. If you are one of my returning subscribers, boy, you guys are going to dig this journey too. This is a lot of fun, and there's a really interesting reason why I've got these pieces here. We're going to talk about some of them. We're going to talk and compare and contrast some of these pieces, because there is a really interesting thread that connects these pieces. If you are new to the channel, I usually begin my videos with a simple disclaimer. I am not a financial advisor. I'm not trying to offer you any kind of financial advice. I'm simply trying to share some of my experience having bought and sold precious metals and rare coins for the last 30 or 40 years. And I like to begin my videos with a definition or two that we can work back into the subject matter. We're talking about no face value legal tender, or NFLT. But there's no better way to kind of explain exactly what I mean by that than stepping back a little bit and talking about NCLT. NCLT stands for non-circulating legal tender. This is an expression that we talk about quite often on this channel and really pretty much all throughout the precious metal stacking community. What it means is pretty simple. This is an example of an American Silver Eagle. This is our new full ounce bullion, silver bullion vehicle. And I refer to these things largely as vehicles. You'll probably hear me say that throughout this video. So what is this? This is 1 troy ounce of pure silver. And you'll see that it actually says 1 ounce fine silver down at the bottom. But you also notice that it says $1. Now, a troy ounce of pure silver on the market today as I'm filming is somewhere around $30, $32, $33 per troy ounce. So you would never spend an American Silver Eagle for $1 when its value is at least $30. Wouldn't make any sense. So why would it have that face value on it? Why would it be a coin rather than just a round? There are lots of different reasons why governments issue these pieces, and what we're talking about throughout all of these pieces is that they're all coins with one exception. A coin is actually made by a sovereign country. A coin has a face value. Or does it? We'll talk about that a little bit later too. In the case of the American Silver Eagles, with $1 face value that you would never ever spend these for, that goes to protect the consumer in a lot of different ways. There are certain investment vehicles, IRAs, and vehicles similar to that, where you can use precious metals in them if they qualify in certain ways. So some of those ways includes pieces that are legal tender coins. There are also municipalities that tax things differently. They charge a surtax on them. There may be tariffs involved. If you are buying pieces that are legal tender coins, those surcharges may be lower, or they could even be higher, depending on your municipality and your taxing authorities. It also has to do with counterfeiting. Counterfeiters are at least a little bit less likely to counterfeit actual sovereign country's currency. And in this case, I'm talking about things like the American Silver Eagle, the Canadian Maple, the Britannia from the UK. If you have something that is a legal tender coin, it becomes a lot less attractive for people to counterfeit. The federal authorities are going to go after people that counterfeit. At least they're supposed to. So these are pieces that, even though they have a face value on them, you would never ever spend these for their face value of $1, or the case of the Canadian pieces, $20, etc. So that's a non-circulating legal tender piece. You wouldn't circulate it, but it is still a legal tender coin. So what is an NFLT, a non-face value legal tender piece? This is an interesting comparison and contrast. And if you're looking at these, you're probably trying to pick out which one of these am I talking about. I'm talking about some of the most popular vehicles that are bought and sold on a daily basis all around the world. At least three of them that we're going to talk about here today have no real face value other than the value of the precious metals contained within them. It's an interesting concept, but they are issued by a country, so they are legal tender coins, even if they don't really have a legal tender face value. Non-face legal tender, or non-face value legal tender, however you want to think about it. Let's jump right into it. The first thing we're going to talk about, since we already talked about these beautiful American silver eagles, are the South African Krugerrand. You might not know it, but the South African Krugerrand is a legal tender coin, and it was originally minted to be spent. They were launched in July of 1967, July 3rd also. That's kind of an interesting date, right? 1967, the name Krugerrand comes from this gentleman. His name is Paul Kruger. He was actually one of the founding fathers of South Africa. The rand is the South African unit of currency. So this is a Kruger rand. It's a very, very special type of South African rand. And it is valued significantly higher than a regular rand would be. So these were originally issued in July of 1967. They are minted from 91.67% pure gold, 22 karat, sometimes called crown gold. And I'm not talking about the stuff that's in your braces or your dentures. These are actually the same purity of gold that has been used in British countries around the world, British colonies around the world for hundreds of years, called crown gold because it was kind of the standard that was set by the British crown. 91.67% pure gold with a balance 8.33% copper. Why would they make these pieces out of gold and copper alloy? Well, that's just one of the pieces of evidence that we have that these were designed to be spent, because pure gold is a very, very soft element, especially when it comes to fine details. I like to say that coins are some of the hardest working machines that have ever been invented by mankind. And when you have pure gold, while it's not soft in terms of day-to-day items, it's still a metal, right? Gold can be very difficult to mint in very, very fine detail. The purity of pure gold is a very soft element when it's coming into contact with other pieces, when it's being circulated. So those fine details can wear out really easily. By alloying the gold with a little bit of copper, you make it substantially stronger. It becomes much more durable, and it becomes something that can be spent. That's evidenced by things like the British sovereign that was spent for 100 years, 150 years. These are pieces that saw circulation. That was the whole point of the South African Krugerrand when it was originally launched. It actually contains 1.09 troy ounces of gold to account for that small amount of copper that's inside of it. But by doing that, by alloying the gold with a copper, they're making something that is durable enough to be spent. So what is the value of one of these coins? It is a Kruger Rand. It is 1 troy ounce of pure gold. That is the value of it. And this was designed to be spent, with the value fluctuating from day to day, even from hour to hour, based on the amount of gold and how gold was being calculated and valued around the world. You were designed to be able to spend these, or these were designed to be spent at the value of 1 ounce of gold. That is their value. So it's not so much a face value, it is the value of the gold contained within. It's an interesting concept and something that we don't think about very often. But if you're looking at South African Krugerrand, and boy, that springbuck antelope on the back is really pretty, isn't it? You'll see that it doesn't say that there's any other kind of value other than Krugerrand on it, but it does say fine gold 1 ounce. So this is 1 ounce of fine gold. That is what it was designed to be spent for. It's actually one of the reasons why I like the Krugerrand, is because they are more durable. You can see that I don't mind these things banging around a little bit with a little bit of careful handling, because it is a pretty durable alloy. These were meant to be spent. They were meant to see circulation. I think it's really interesting. Don't take my word for it, though. By 1980s, the Krugerrand had actually made up about 90% of the world's gold coins. Obviously, it fell out of favor very quickly after that, as countries around the world, citizens around the world, corporations were starting to realize that South Africa was run under a kind of government called apartheid, and the Krugerrand was out of favor pretty quickly. But at one point, It was literally the only gold coin that you could really find in the entire world. The Krugerrand was it. Per Wikipedia, and I'm going to quote Wikipedia a little bit in this video, although gold Krugerrand coins have no face value, they are considered legal tender in South Africa by the South African Reserve Bank Act, which is called SABRA, or SARBRA, of 1989. So this was actually designed to be a legal tender coin starting in the 1960s, but they codified it, the government of South Africa, going all the way back, something on the order of 35 years ago. These are legal tender, but there is no face value. An interesting concept, right? The next one I want to talk about is something that I've actually had cycle through my stack over the years, and of course you always kind of kick yourself after you get rid of something. And I'm talking about the Mexican gold Libertad. The South African Krugerrand obviously was first in 1967, but the gold Libertad actually came about before the silver Libertad. It was originally launched in 1981. You're seeing an image of one of them here. Looks almost identical, right, to the silver Libertad. We're looking at examples of the beautiful original silver version of these. Yes, if you've watched my channel before, you know that I'm a huge fan of the Mexican Libertad. The gold Libertad launched in 1981. It came in a quarter ounce, half ounce, and full ounce size, originally produced in 900 fine gold, which is the same gold that the United States of America had used for its circulating gold coins all the way up until 1933. Again, interesting that they're made out of an alloy that can be circulated. After about a 10-year hiatus, these pieces were relaunched in 1991, and they are now issued in 999 fine gold. You can buy them to this day. Launched again in the 20th ounce and 1/10 ounce sizes also. The new 3/4 reverse of the coin. Technically, this is the reverse of a Mexican coin. That is the obverse of the Mexican coin with the state seal of Mexico on it. That's the front of the coin. This is the back of the coin. Released with that 3/4 profile that I'm just not quite as much of a fan of into about the year 2000. So what is the point of this? Why am I talking about the Libertad? The Libertad is valued at 1 ounce of gold, the gold Libertad at least. It is very similar in that regard to the South African Krugerrand. Nowhere on that do you see that there is any kind of a value other than 1 ounce. That is its legal tender value. Interesting, per Wikipedia, Libertads are devoid of a face value. Devoid of a face value, yet are legal tender, still accepted as currency and guaranteed by Banco de Mexico based on the market value of its gold content. The same is true of the silver Mexican Libertad. So it was launched in 1982, and it also came in a full troy ounce size. Fractions started in 1991. You're looking at some really cool fractions of the Libertad here. You've got the half, the quarter, the 10th, and even the 1/20th troy ounce. These are really neat pieces, and it's so fortunate to have this really nice matching set that's got some really beautiful tones starting to appear here. So these are examples of the fractional pieces of the Mexican Libertad. Yes, these are actually designed to be spent, at least theoretically. I think we're getting a little bit farther away from the point at which gold and silver would really be circulating, but the idea was that these were designed that they had a face value. The face value is either 1 troy ounce or its fractions thereof of gold, or 1 troy ounce and its fractions thereof of silver also. So these beautiful pieces are actually legal tender coins, but they don't really have a face value other than the value of the silver or gold contained within them. Non-face value legal tender. Kind of neat, right? I am a huge fan of the Libertad, and you're seeing one of the original rolls here. These are pieces that are still contained within the roll. They've never been opened up, and you're looking at some of my favorite pieces. This is the more modern version of the Mexican Libertad. I'm just not as much of a fan. I've talked about this a little bit before. I actually did a video series called Stacking Mexican Silver, and I talk about these pieces in volumes 4 and volumes 5 of that series. 4 is actually a 2-part video series. I'll talk about that again in just a second. What else do we have here? What other goodies do we have that we can look at? A very interesting piece, and this is kind of an enigmatic piece. This is one that's a little bit hard to nail down, but what you're looking at here is an Isle of Man platinum Noble. And you can see that it actually says 1 ounce platinum fine, 1 Noble. Isle of Man is a country, it's a protectorate of the UK, on an island kind of between the islands of Great Britain and Ireland. So kind of in the Irish Sea, there is an island called the Isle of Man. I've talked a little bit about the Isle of Man. I've had a few of their other pieces in the past, but the Isle of Man Platinum Noble is a really peculiar and really fascinating modern bullion coin. It was the world's first platinum coin created for investors. Russia had released platinum coins, circulating platinum coins, way back in the 1800s and actually had made them for quite a while. But this was really the first one that was made for investors in the same way that the Silver Eagle, even the Krugerrand, and the Silver and Gold Libertads were made for investors. So it was the first one. It was launched in 1983. So it's right in there with the 1981, 1982 of the Mexican Libertad. Isle of Man saw the opportunity and launched the first platinum bullion coin. Canadian Maple, 1988. American Platinum Eagle, 1997. I'm talking about the platinum pieces. Issued sporadically. Wikipedia actually says issued erratically. That's pretty bizarre for a modern mint to be making pieces out of kind of strange and unusual times and amounts and quantities. It's a really fascinating series. And they have mintages that are not easy to find also. The Isle of Man is notorious for not publishing the mintages of the pieces that they made. This is a difficult series to collect, but it's also a challenging series in a lot of very fun ways. They've been minted by at least 3 different private mints that we're aware of. The Liechtenstein Investment Trust is one of them. And then most famously, probably the Pobjoy Mint, which just recently closed after years and years of putting these pieces out. And also even the Tower Mint. So all of these mints, these private mints, were contracted with the Isle of Man to produce these really interesting and enigmatic platinum pieces. That is a Viking ship on it, by the way. Beautiful coin in its own right. Isle of Man has issued 1/20th, 1/10th, 1/4, 1/2, and full ounce pieces over the years, but very erratically. Some of them only issued for 1 year, some of them in incredibly small quantities, none of them ever issued in huge quantities. They've also issued small numbers of gold and silver pieces also. Per Wikipedia, we're going to go to Wikipedia again to talk about the Isle of Man Platinum Noble. Nobles are legal tender, but they do not have a fixed face value. Instead, like the Krugerrand or Mexico's Libertad, they are legal tender to the value of their precious metal content. Now, the Isle of Man, probably a lot less likely for you to be spending a platinum coin on, but it's still there. This is still the concept that it has no real face value other than its legal or other than its pure metal content. The same as the South African Krugerrand, the same as the gold and silver Libertads. It was designed to be spent at the value of an ounce of platinum. Which one of these can you actually see yourself spending? I gotta say that the South African Krugerrand, issued in the 1960s, kind of makes sense. You can almost see yourself, if you were in South Africa in the 60s or early 70s, spending these pieces. Gold wouldn't have been that expensive. It would have been probably in the $50 per ounce range. So these wouldn't not make sense as a legal tender vehicle for you to be spending. Now, not so much, right? But the fact is that without being tied to a face value, they have the ability to fluctuate based on their precious metal content in ways that a lot of these other vehicles really can't do. So even though we're in the 2020s now, you could still spend a South African Krugerrand for the value of gold. It has gone up in value just as the value of the gold has gone up in value. It's a fascinating concept. It's a really interesting idea. I've got some honorable mentions that I wanted to talk about. 2 of them that I've talked about a little bit in the past. One of them I'm going to be talking about in an upcoming video. You're going to have to stay tuned for that. So the reason we've got this beautiful stack of onzas here, and I'm guilty of constantly comparing and contrasting the Mexican Libertad, which says 1 onza on it. And when you're reading it while you're trying to shoot a video or you're talking to somebody about it, it's really easy to forget that you're not talking about the same thing. What I'm talking about with the onza, and you're looking at an onza here, is a beautiful silver coin that was made in 1978, 1979, and 1980. Now, I said coin. It's not technically a coin, and that's one of the reasons why I wanted to count this as an honorable mention, but maybe not quite the same thing as the other three pieces that we've already talked about. The silver onza that Mexico released was originally released in 1949, and you're looking at a 1949 onza here. And what really made this piece groundbreaking, earth-shattering, is that it says it's purity in thousandths or parts per thousand, 0.925. 925, obviously, that's sterling silver. You have to remember that most circulating coins, silver coins at the time, were either made out of the Mexican standard of 72% pure or the American more common standard of 90% pure. So this was actually much more pure than either of those two purities. That's one of the things that sets this piece apart. But aside from actually listing on it what the purity is all the way to parts per thousand, it has the weights in grains, it has the weights in grams, and most important, it has the weight in a troy ounce. This is one of, if not the first vehicles ever released by a sovereign country that is weighed in troy ounces, something that we take for granted in the 2020s. Mexico was doing it all the way back in 1949. Now, what's interesting about these pieces is that they are a beautiful design. This is issued by the country of Mexico. They made 1 million of these pieces, which is not an insignificant number. But they don't have a face value. These were truly never meant to be spent. They, unlike the Krugerrand and the Libertads, and even the Platinum Noble, were never monetized by the country of Mexico. So they are not technically coins. It's a strange hair to split when you start talking about these really fine definitions. The fact that Mexico released 1 million of these pieces, that they are exactly 1 troy ounce of pure silver in a 92.5% pure silver vehicle, is a really fascinating thing. Clearly, these weren't just designed for collectors. These were designed for people to hold because they were making 1 million of them. That is a huge number of these pieces. It's a fascinating thing to think about also. A one-year type, and then they re-released them in 1978, 1979, and 1980 with small design element changes, but everything else was the same. They were still 92.5% pure and 1 full troy ounce of silver in that 92.5% pure. The weight given in grains, grams, and troy ounces, they were never monetized. So there is no technical face value to these. Again, one of the reasons why I wanted to include them is because they share so many of the characteristics with these other pieces, except they weren't monetized. They don't have a face value. They weren't meant to be spent. Or were they? We do often see these pieces that are circulated. So it's possible that at least locally they were spent and exchanged in the way that a silver coin would have been exchanged. And when you're talking about pieces from the 1940s or even pieces all the way up into the 1970s, when we see these pieces that are clearly have some circulation to them, you have to stop and wonder. Also, one of the interesting things about these is that they were not a commemorative, right? There's nothing that they're commemorating here. There's no famous battle or famous father of the country that's included on it. In fact, the design elements are about as staid as they could possibly be. That's a coin press and that's a scale, right? These are designed to be bullion vehicles, but they weren't ever monetized. It's an interesting compare and contrast between some of these beautiful pieces. No face value. And the last thing that I wanted to mention is also a Mexican piece. This one is a lot more intriguing, and I will be talking about this piece in an upcoming video. It's a very, very special example of the Mexican 50 peso gold coin. This was called the Centenario because it was originally issued in 1921, and that's to celebrate the birth of the Mexican nation, 100-year anniversary of it. But there is one special version of this coin that has some elements that I think has flown under the radar long enough, and it's time that we spill the beans on that piece. Definitely keep your eyes open for that upcoming video. No face legal tender. Does it make a difference to you? Have you ever thought about it in these ways? Does it matter to you? Do you not stack these pieces? Do you see them any differently now that you suddenly realize that there is no face value to some of the most sought after precious metal bullion vehicles that are on the market? I think it's fascinating, and it's not a coincidence that I have stacks of these. One of the reasons that I do is because they are intriguing and interesting to me. If you have questions about any of the things that we talked about here today, definitely go ahead and leave that question down below. As you know, I'm fond of saying if you've got a question, there's a good chance somebody else has that question. Let's see if we can answer it for everybody. In fact, I launched a series of videos recently called the Subscriber Question and Answer video series. And if you've got a question that's interesting enough that I can't just answer it with a simple sentence or two, I might actually make a video just about your question. That's a fun way to have a video for you preserved for all time up on the internet. I do go live most Friday evenings. In fact, let's just say every Friday evening, I'm there live with a brand new premiere. Hopefully you are watching this video with me on a Friday evening because you clicked on that notification button down below. If you didn't, go ahead and click on it now, become part of this community, subscribe to the channel, join me on Friday evenings for the premiere of videos, and I'm usually there to talk during the video, so you can ask questions about the things that you're seeing. It's a great way to connect with other people in the community. And we also go live immediately after the premiere of the videos almost every Friday, and that is a really fun way to take an even deeper dive into the subject that we've talked about, really have good conversations with other folks in the community, mostly about anything precious metal or coin related, but we do slip in some interesting topics once in a while that aren't really technically part of this. It's a great way to start the weekend, and I really look forward to those lives also. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, go ahead and click on that subscription button now. Love to have you be part of the community. Always be learning. And thank you for allowing me to be a part of your journey as we go deeper into the world of coins and physical precious metals.